Second, diversity and difference are essential for renewal, foundations for growth, innovation, creativity, invention. This is the rainforest effect. Different people bring different points of view, different perspectives to arrive at different solutions to solve different problems and create new ideas and new ways of thinking. The best examples, of course, come from Silicon Valley, where Richard Florida has found that it is the high level of immigrant entrepreneurs that have created that kind of intellectual innovation and drive. In studies from Canada, we have found that there's a direct link to those corporations who file the highest numbers of patents and who have the highest number of immigrant scientists working for them. Transposing this idea to the world of culture, look at this. Here's what happens. You take jazz, you mix in blues, you throw in some gospel music, and what do you get? Rock and roll. Diversity also, and this again comes from science, breaks groupthink. If you just wait a minute and think about this. If you hang out with the same people, if you work with the same kind of people who all went to the same school, all ate the same food, all read the same books, all live in the same kind of houses, it is likely, it's not guaranteed, but it is likely that they will all think alike. This is what we in Canada call the old boys club. Or as someone has said, this is a group of people who are pale, male, and stale. I didn't say that. I don't think anyone is stale here. And this is what Einstein said. When we all think alike, no one actually thinks very much. Next, I would say a benefit of diversity is, and this is really important for consumer-facing industries, diversity helps you decode the customer needs of growing market segments. This is a page view from the Tire Review in the United States. I didn't even know they have a magazine devoted to selling tires. And in this article, they say quite clearly, if you want to sell to Latinos in the United States, do not sell to the men. The Latino man never makes an important household purchasing decision without consulting his family, his daughter, his son, his grandmother, and his aunt. So sell to the whole family. Differently, I'll tell you a lovely story from Canada. About 10 years ago, Canadian banks had very rigid rules on who qualified for mortgages. It was one house, one family. So the mother and father could both work, and their income qualified them for mortgage approval. They couldn't cope with houses that were owned by multiple families. As more immigrants came to Toronto in particular, well, you know immigrants, it's not just the mother and the father who live together, it's the mother's sister, it's the brother's, it's the husband's uncle. This is how they pool their wealth to create family assets. There was no way Canadian banks were able to deal with that until immigrant teams in the banks told the case and did the figures and said, you are losing important market segments. You have to adjust your mortgage approval criteria so that the entire family income can be taken into account as long as family members' names are on the deeds. Now, it's a common product in all Canadian banks. This is important. Research has told us that diverse teams, especially at the leadership level, make better decisions in times of crisis. In 2008 and 2009, we had a financial meltdown. The Deutsche Bank said diverse leadership teams do better than non-diverse teams in times of crisis. And I think this is partly because diverse teams around the leadership table are better able to call out bad behavior. Think of the amount of bad behavior that happened around corporate boardrooms in the 2007, 8, 9, when junk bonds was sold. And I have an inherent belief that part of this happened because nobody said, But wait a second, because they were all the people around the table had shared values, shared experiences. They all belonged to the same kind of network. When you have someone who is significantly different, that person is better able to call out bad behavior. I'll give you a wonderful example from New Zealand. This is, of course, Christchurch. You all remember the terrible earthquake that happened. In Christchurch, the police, even before the earthquake, had extensive relationships with migrant groups. When the earthquake hit, and it hit the neighborhoods of the migrant groups really hard, the police was in a position to respond very quickly, and they set up earthquake response headquarters in a Buddhist temple, in mosques and other ethnic community hubs, and saving precious time, they were able to equip the first responders with local languages. So that's how they were able to deal with the moment in crisis. Let's go on to community ownership. This is, of course, City Hall in New York. If the community, and this is really important, sees that your cities, your institutes, your leaders, your organizations, in other words, the people who make the important decisions that impact on people's lives, if it sees that their leaders look like the people who live in the city, they are more likely to aspire to those positions. I want to commend New York City Hall on this. 39% of elected city councilors in New York are minorities, Hispanic, African Americans, and Asians. And I am sure this did not happen, but I am also sure that New Yorkers from different backgrounds are better able to aspire to political leadership because someone already has broken through that door for them. Some people ask me about the politics of representation. Can someone represent me only when they look like me? They have my life experience? I will say no. I expect the Prime Minister of Canada, who absolutely does not look like me, by the way, to make decisions that are good for me. I expect him to make decisions that are good for me. But he will never be able to make those decisions unless he surrounds himself with people, some people who share in my life view, my perspectives, my realities, so that his decisions can be moderated and influenced. I think of this as the politics of informed decision-making through inclusion as opposed to the politics of mere representation. So no doubt this is all a challenging journey, but as Wayne Gretzky, I'll invoke him again, said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. At Maytree in Toronto, we took a deliberate shot. We chose to focus not on diversity, but on diversity in leadership, taking the bar a little higher. Why? Because leaders have power and influence, because they have capacity to shape the agenda, they have the resources to shift strategies, organizational, political, etc., and because they serve as role models, particularly for young people. In addition, in Toronto, we wondered whether leadership that is diverse brings benefits to the bottom line of the city. And our research told us, and I'm just repeating what I told you, leadership and diversity improves organizational and financial problems. It links you to new global and domestic markets. It expands your access to local and global talent pools, and it assures enhanced innovation and creativity. So what did we do? We decided to launch a research report called Counts, which we have done every year since 2009, where we actually counted the leadership positions in our city. We found that there were 3,223 leadership positions in our city. These included elected officials, whether they were local, state, or national, police chiefs and deputy chiefs, the top leaders of our biggest financial 500 corporations, deputy ministers and assistant deputy ministers, the heads of our hospitals, museums, and public institutions, principals and vice principals in our schools, and so on and so forth, and we came to the number 3,223. And this is what we found. In a city of roughly 4 million people, where 49.5%, half this room, look like me and Kathy. only 13%, top 3 rows there, were visible minorities. In other words, we had the evidence to conclude Toronto is diverse, its leadership is not. And here are some of the ways we presented this. You can see that there is variation in sectors. There's context to all of this. The corporate sector is always at the bottom. Agencies, boards, and commissions is at 22%, which is a good sign. In addition, and I think this will interest you, we found some really interesting findings about tokenism versus inclusion. Everybody understand the word tokenism? No? A token is someone who's put at a place just to sit there, not to contribute. You're there because you're the one woman that we want. You're there because you're the one disabled person that we want. You're there because you're the one gay person that we want, but you really don't have anything to say, okay? Research tells us that when there is one in a group of 10 who is different, they are likely to be considered, be that one a woman, a minority, a disabled, whatever. They are likely to be considered by the other 9 as a token. Whether they are or not, they're likely to be considered. You make that 2. Those 2 are likely to be considered an interest group, working together against everybody else. It's only when you get to 3. So our motto is not 1, not 2, but 3. So with this research, what did we do? We launched a number of initiatives, and I'm not going to describe them all in the interest of time. I'm just going to talk very quickly about diversity on board, because this is what we're all gathered here, to try and bring diversity on board to your cities. It's a simple idea. This is not rocket science. This is not Einstein making the E is equal to mc squared, which I have never figured out quite what that means. This is a very simple idea. You find visible minorities, you provide them with the training, you match them with boards. To date in Toronto, we have made close to 700 matches, and we're working with over 1,600 candidates. And this is here, why it is important for you. I picked 4 cities: Auckland, Berlin, New York, and London. And I have to tell you, here's our challenge in comparing, because jurisdictions use data differently and use terminology differently. I would have preferred to use minorities, but guess what? In Germany, they actually don't measure minorities. They measure, what do you call them? Deutsche mit Migrationshintergrund, yeah, which could mean anything. Martin and I will have a discussion about that. But you can see the level of diversity of those who are foreign-born, which is not the same as minorities. But you're going to have to help me out here a little, because I don't have the data, and I don't want to misrepresent the fact. Look at Auckland, incredible. Look at London, 37%, but I think a lot of those foreign-born are fly-in, fly-out expatriates. New York City, very impressive. Berlin, I'm not confident with that number, but I will. Okay, so here are your cities. Let's take a look at your leaders. Let's go to your mayors. Okay, next. Let's go to your police chiefs. Next. Let's go to your head librarians. Thank God there are a couple of women there. And finally, let's go to your presidents of the boards of museums. I could have carried this on, but I chose to stop here. Let me make a conclusion. Your cities are diverse. Your leadership is not. So today we are gathered to take diversity on board to cities. Your contexts are different. Your diversity is different. The way you define governance is different. But let's commit to building this movement one city at a time, from Toronto to Berlin, from Copenhagen to Seattle, to Vancouver, to Auckland, to Reggio Emilia, and so on and so forth. And let me close my comments by invoking the words of another great Canadian, Leonard Cohen. Who's heard of Leonard Cohen? Yes. And do you remember his famous lines? First I'll take Manhattan, then I'll take Berlin. Let that be our rallying cry. Thank you very much.